The giant space station, called New Haven, floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most cities on Earth, made of silver metal that gleamed under the light of distant suns. Inside its biggest meeting room, creatures from 7 different worlds sat around a table that could hold hundreds of beings. Admiral Kextar stood at the front of the room. He was tall, with blue skin and 4 arms that moved as he talked. His people, the Zephyrians, had ruled space for thousands of years. But now his face showed only fear and sadness. "We are losing this war," he said. His voice was deep and filled with pain. "The Devourers have taken 60 of our worlds. Our fleets are broken. Our people are dying." Around the table, other alien leaders made sounds of agreement. The Sorcs, who looked like giant lizards with golden scales, hissed softly. The Luminari, beings made of pure light, dimmed until they were barely visible. The Chitauri, insect-like, creatures with wings that buzzed, clicked their sharp teeth together. For 3 long years, they had fought the Devourers. These enemies were not alive like other beings. They were machines, all controlled by one giant mind. They came from the dark spaces between galaxies, eating everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. Nothing could stop them. "Our energy weapons do nothing," said Bright Star of Morning, the Luminari leader. Her voice sounded like music, but sad music. "Their shields adapt to everything we throw at them. Our plasma cannons might as well be toys." "My warriors are brave," growled General Scarclaw of the Sorcs. "But bravery means nothing when the enemy cannot be hurt. They learn from every battle. They get stronger while we get weaker." In the corner of the room, almost hidden behind the larger aliens, sat a small figure. Commander Lisa Park was human, from a planet called Earth. She had dark hair tied back and wore a simple blue uniform. Compared to the other beings in the room, she looked tiny, and Wheat Dot Earth had joined the Galactic Defense Coalition only 6 months ago. The humans had offered to help, bringing their small fleet of ships. Most of the aliens thought human technology was a joke. Their ships used chemical rockets instead of gravity drives. They fought with metal bullets instead of energy beams. To the advanced Galians, humans seemed like children playing with toys. "Perhaps it is time to discuss surrender," said Admiral Kextar. The word hit the room like a bomb. Several aliens began talking at once, their voices mixing into noise. "Surrender?" Scarclaw roared. "My people do not know this word. Your people will be dead if we keep fighting," Bright Star of Morning replied. Her light flashed angry colors. "We have lost too much already. Better to save what we can." "The Devourers do not take prisoners," said Queen Hive Song of the Chitauri. Her voice buzzed like 1,000 insects. "They consume everything. There is no surrender, only death or victory." Admiral Kextar raised all 4 arms for silence. "Then we must face facts. We have tried everything. Our best scientists, our greatest weapons, our most brilliant tactics. Nothing works. The Devourers adapt faster than we can change. Each battle makes them stronger. What about the human offer?" asked a small voice. Everyone turned to look at Lisa Park. She had been quiet during the entire meeting, just listening and watching. Now she stood up, her small frame dwarfed by the aliens around her. "What did you say?" Admiral Kextar asked. "The human offer," Lisa repeated. 3 days ago, Admiral Hayes sent a message. She offered to lead a final attack on the Devourer fleet at Terminus 7. You dismissed it without discussion." Scarclaw laughed, a sound like rocks breaking. "The humans? Their ships are made of metal and fire. Their weapons shoot tiny pieces of iron. What could they possibly do that we cannot?" "Maybe that is exactly the point," Lisa said quietly. Bright Star of Morning pulsed with confusion. "Explain your meaning, human." Lisa took a deep breath. She knew how this would sound to these advanced beings. For 3 years, you have fought the Devourers with energy and logic. Perfect formations, coordinated attacks, advanced technology. Every time they adapt can defeat you. Maybe the answer is not more advanced technology. Maybe the answer is something they cannot predict. You speak of chaos. Queen Hive's song buzzed. Randomness. Disorder. These are not tactics. These are the ways of primitive creatures. Yes, Lisa said, we are primitive. Our technology is thousands of years behind yours. But we are still here. We survived on a dangerous world by being unpredictable, by adapting, by fighting with whatever we could find. Admiral Kekstar studied the small human. And you believe this primitive approach can defeat an enemy that has crushed our most advanced. Fleets? I believe you have nothing left to lose, Lisa replied. Give us one battle, one chance. If we fail, you can surrender. If we succeed, double quotes, she paused. Well, maybe chaos is exactly what this war needs. The room fell silent. The great alien minds processed this strange idea. Finally, Admiral Kekstar spoke. Very well, Commander Park. Contact your Admiral Hayes. Tell her the Coalition agrees to her plan. One battle, one chance. His 4 eyes fixed on her. But understand, if you're humans, fail, we will have no choice but to seek terms with the Devourers. Lisa nodded. Understood, Admiral. We will not fail. As the meeting ended and the aliens filed out, many of them shook their heads or made dismissive sounds. The small human female and her primitive species, what could they possibly accomplish? But Lisa Parks smiled as she walked to the communication center. They had no idea what humanity was capable of. The aliens had forgotten something important in their millions of years of advanced civilization. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that refuses to follow the rules. The human fleet gathered near Jupiter, far from the watchful eyes of their alien allies. 50 ships floated in the darkness, looking nothing like the elegant vessels of the Galactic Coalition, where alien ships were smooth and curved like art. Pieces, human ships were blocky and covered in armor. They bristled with weapons that seemed crude compared to energy beams and plasma. Cannons. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the largest human ship in the fleet. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. Around him, his crew worked at control panels that would have looked ancient to alien eyes. Everything was mechanical switches and physical buttons instead of thought-controlled interfaces. Status report, Jake said to his second-in-command. All ships ready, Captain, replied Lieutenant Commander Kate Bell. She was young but experienced, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Admiral Hayes wants to speak with all ship captains in 1 hour. Jake nodded and looked out at the fleet. Through the window, each ship was different. Some were carriers filled with fighter craft. Others were destroyers packed with missiles. A few were massive battleships covered in gun turrets. To alien eyes, they would look like museum pieces from a primitive age. But Jake knew better. These ships had been designed for one thing: war. Real war, where things broke and people died and victory went to whoever could adapt the fastest. The relentless Colonel Amy Davis was inspecting her Marines. 2,000 soldiers stood in neat rows, wearing powered armor that made them look like metal giants. But unlike alien battlesuits that used energy shields and beam weapons, human armor was thick steel plates designed to stop bullets and shrapnel. Listen. Up, Amy shouted. Her voice echoed in the ship's cargo bay. You all know what we are facing. The Devourers have beaten every advanced army in the galaxy. They adapt to energy weapons. They counter sophisticated tactics. They think like machines because they are machines. A young Marine raised his hand. Ma'am, If they are so advanced, how are we supposed to beat them? Amy smiled. It was not. Nice smile. Because we do not fight like the others, soldier. We fight like humans. We use bullets instead of beams. We use explosives instead of energy. We hit them where it hurts, and we do not stop hitting until they are dead. She walked down the line of soldiers. The aliens fight with perfect coordination. Every move planned, every attack coordinated. You know what we call that? Predictable, Mom, the Marines shouted back. Exactly, predictable. The Devourers can adapt to predictable. They cannot adapt to chaos. In space nearby, Lieutenant Ben Clark was briefing his fighter pilots. Ben was only 25, but he had grown up playing flight simulators and dreaming of space combat. Now he sat in the cockpit of his Wasp-class fighter, talking to his squadron over the radio. Forget everything you learned about formation flying, he told them. The alien pilots fly in perfect patterns. Beautiful to watch, easy to predict. We are going to fly like maniacs. Sir? Asked one pilot. That sounds dangerous. It is dangerous. Ben agreed, but it is also effective. The Devourers expect organized attacks, energy weapons fired in coordinated patterns, shields operating in harmony. They have adapted to counter all of that. He paused, checking his weapon systems. Unlike alien fighters that used plasma cannons, his ship carried old-fashioned missiles and machine guns that fired metal bullets. We are going to hit them with something they have never seen before. Pure, chaotic, human aggression. Every pilot makes his own decisions. Trust your instincts. Fight like your life depends on it, because it does. Aboard the command ship Independence, Admiral Susan Hayes reviewed battle reports with her staff. She was a woman in her 50s, with iron-gray hair and eyes like steel. She had commanded fleets in 3 different wars and never lost a battle. The Devourers have one weakness, she told her officers. They think like a machine, one mind controlling everything. Perfect coordination, but also perfect predictability. Her intelligence officer, Commander Rick Stone, nodded. Our analysis shows they adapt to energy-based attacks within minutes. But they have never faced kinetic weapons or chemical explosives. More than that, Susan said. They have never faced truly independent thinking. Look at these battle reports. Every Allied attack follows the same pattern. Coordinated, logical, efficient. She pointed to a holographic display showing previous battles. The aliens fight like chess masters. Every move calculated. Every strategy perfect. But we are not going to play chess. What game are we playing, Admiral? Asked Commander Stone. Susan smiled. Street fighting. No rules, no coordination. Every ship for itself within a larger plan. We are going to hit them with 50 different strategies at once and let chaos sort it out. The preparations continued for days. Human ships loaded chemical explosives that the aliens considered primitive. Marines trained in boarding techniques that no civilized species had used in centuries. Pilots practiced maneuvers that would have horrified their alien allies. The alien observers who watched from a distance shook their heads in dismay. Where was the coordination? The elegant formations? The sophisticated energy weapons? The humans seemed to be preparing for disaster. Not victory. Admiral Kekstar visited the human fleet one day before the battle. He toured the Defiance with Captain Morrison, trying to understand human tactics. Your ships are so crude, he said, looking at a missile launcher. Why do you use these chemical explosives instead of plasma torpedoes? Because plasma torpedoes are energy weapons, Jake replied. The Devourers adapt to energy. But it is hard to adapt to 1,000 pounds of high explosive going off inside your hull. Kekstar watched human Marines practicing with their projectile. Weapons. Your soldiers use metal bullets. Primitive kinetic weapons. Our energy rifles are far more advanced. Advanced, yes, Colonel Davis said. But your energy rifles do not work anymore, do they? The Devourers adapted. These bullets work. The same way they did 500 years ago. The alien admiral left the human fleet more confused than ever. How could these primitive tactics possibly succeed where advanced technology had failed? But Admiral Hayes was not worried. She understood something the aliens had forgotten in their millions of years of civilization. Sometimes the best answer to a complex problem is a simple solution, and nothing was simpler than human violence unleashed without rules or limits. The countdown to battle began. In a few hours, they would face the Devourers at Terminus 7. The aliens expected another defeat. The Devourers expected another easy victory. Neither of them expected the storm that was coming. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Terminus 7 system. The sight that greeted them would have made most warriors turn and run. Thousands of Devourer ships filled the space around the dead planet. They moved in perfect formation, black metal hulls gleaming in the light of the dying star. Each ship was identical, sleek, efficient, and deadly. They had no windows or obvious weapons, just smooth surfaces that could adapt to any threat. Admiral Kekstar commanded the Allied fleet from his flagship, the Morning Star. Around him, captains from 7 different species prepared for what everyone expected to be their final battle. All ships maintain formation, Kekstar ordered. His forearms moved across control panels as graceful as a dancer. Energy weapons to full power. Prepare coordinated assault pattern Delta 7. The alien ships moved into position with mathematical precision. Zephyrian cruisers formed the center line. Sorex battleships took the flanks. Luminari destroyers created a screen in front. It was beautiful to watch, hundreds of ships moving as one. But in the back of the formation, something different was happening. Admiral Susan Hayes stood on the bridge of the Independence, watching her captains prepare for battle. Around her, 50 human ships waited like wolves ready to hunt. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes, she broadcast on the human command frequency. Forget everything the textbooks taught you. Forget formation flying. Forget coordinated attacks. When I give the word, you are free to engage the enemy as you see fit. Captain Jake Morrison grinned as he heard the order. This was what humans did best, organized chaos. You heard the Admiral, he told his crew. All weapons free, all tactics authorized. Let's show these machines what real fighting looks like. The Devourer fleet detected the approaching coalition and immediately began their standard response. The black ships moved with inhuman precision, forming attack patterns that had destroyed every enemy they had ever faced. Enemy fleet deploying, reported Commander Kate Bell. They are forming the same pattern they used at the Battle of Kepler Station. Of course they are, Susan replied. They fight like a computer program. Same response to the same input. But today we are going to give them different input. Admiral Kekstar began the battle exactly as expected. All ships execute assault pattern Delta 7. Coordinated plasma barrage in 3.2.1. Fire. The alien fleet opened fire together. Hundreds of energy beams lanced through space, lighting up the darkness like a fireworks display. The plasma cannons and particle beams struck the Devourer ships with incredible force. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. Several enemy ships flickered and sparked under the assault. But then their hulls began to adapt. The black metal surface changed, creating new patterns that absorbed and deflected the energy weapons. Within minutes, the Devourer shields had adjusted completely. The alien weapons were doing almost no damage at all. Impossible, whispered Bright Star of Morning. They adapted faster than ever before. The mechanical enemy, began their counterattack. Energy beams more powerful than anything in the galaxy struck back at the Allied fleet. Alien ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The perfect formations began to crumble. Admiral Kekstar watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. In the first hour of battle, they lost 30 ships. It was going exactly like every previous engagement. The Devourers learning, adapting, and winning. Admiral called his communications officer. The humans are requesting permission to engage. Kekstar looked at his tactical display. The human ships had stayed in the back, watching the slaughter. Now they wanted to join the fight with their primitive weapons? Very well, he said. All human ships, you are clear to engage. May the ancestors forgive us. Admiral Hayes heard the transmission and smiled. All ships, you heard the Admiral. Weapons free. Break formation. Engage at will. What happened next had never been seen in galactic warfare. The 50 human ships scattered in every direction. There was no formation, no coordination, no elegant patterns. Each captain made independent decisions based on their own judgment and instincts. Captain Morrison drove the Defiance straight into the center of the enemy fleet, his massive ship bristling with missile launchers and gun turrets. All weapons. Fire at will, he shouted. The ship unleashed a barrage of metal projectiles and chemical explosives. The Devourer ships, designed to counter energy weapons, had no defense against old-fashioned bullets and bombs. Explosions ripped through their hulls as kinetic energy tore apart systems designed for a different kind of warfare. Captain Rachel Green commanded the destroyer Vengeance. Instead of maintaining safe distance like the aliens, she drove her ship directly at a Devourer cruiser. At the last moment, she fired every missile she had and used the ship's thrusters to spin away from the explosion. The alien observers watched. In shock, this was not warfare as they understood it. This was chaos. This was madness, but it was working. The Devourers tried to adapt to the human attacks, but there was nothing consistent to adapt to. One ship would attack head-on with missiles. Another would circle and fire machine guns. A third would ram directly into the enemy hull and detonate explosives. Every human ship fought differently because every human captain thought differently. There was no central pattern for the Devourer hive mind to analyze and counter. Lieutenant Ben Clark led his fighter squadron into the heart of the enemy formation. Unlike alien pilots who flew in perfect wedges, the human fighters moved like a pack of wild animals. Break and attack. Ben shouted over the radio. Pick your own targets. Trust your instincts. The small human fighters dove and weaved through. The Devourer fleet, their bullets and missiles striking weak points that energy weapons could never reach. The enemy tried to track them, but the chaotic flight patterns made prediction impossible. For the first time in 3 years, Devourer ships began to explode. Admiral Kekstar watched the tactical display in amazement. The humans had been in battle for only 20 minutes, and already they had destroyed more enemy ships than the aliens had in the past 6 months. How? He whispered. How are they doing this? Commander Lisa Park, who had joined him on the bridge, smiled grimly. Because they are not trying to win a civilized war, Admiral. They are trying to survive a fight. And humans are very good at fighting dirty. On the Independence, Admiral Hayes coordinated the chaos without trying to control it. Her orders were simple: attack, adapt, and never give the enemy time to think. Morrison, you have 3 cruisers moving to flank you, she radioed. Copy that, Admiral. We will handle it, came the reply. But instead of following standard evasive maneuvers, Morrison did something unexpected. He turned directly toward the enemy ships and launched every missile he had at point-blank range. The Devourers expected him to retreat or seek support. They had no response programmed for a ship that would sacrifice itself to destroy the enemy. Morrison's ship was badly damaged, but all 3 Devourer cruisers were completely destroyed. As the battle raged on, something unprecedented began to happen. The Devourer fleet, which had never retreated in galactic history, began to pull back. Their hive mind was experiencing something it had never encountered before: true unpredictability. Every time it tried to analyze human tactics and develop countermeasures, the humans would change tactics or do something that made no logical sense. Admiral Hayes saw the enemy hesitation on her displays and knew this was the moment. All ships. General, advance, she ordered. Press the attack. Do not let them regroup. The human fleet surged forward like a pack of predators, sensing wounded prey. Behind them, the surviving alien ships watched in wonder as their primitive allies achieved what advanced technology could not. For the first time since the war began, doubt crept into the Devourer collective consciousness. These creatures did not fight like anything they had ever encountered. They fought like chaos itself had been given ships and weapons. And chaos, they were learning, was very hard to defeat. The battle had been raging for 2 hours, and the impossible was happening. The Devourer fleet, which had crushed every enemy for 3 years, was losing. Admiral Susan Hayes watched her tactical display with fierce satisfaction. Red dots representing enemy ships were disappearing faster than she had ever dared to hope. Her strategy of controlled chaos was working better than any plan she had ever made. Admiral, called her communications officer, Captain Morrison is requesting permission to attempt a boarding action. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Boarding enemy ships was something that had not been done in galactic warfare for centuries. The aliens considered it barbaric and primitive. Permission granted, she said. Tell him to make it count. Captain Jake Morrison's ship, the Defiance, was battered and scarred from the fighting. Half his weapons were destroyed, and his hull was filled with holes, but his ship was still flying, and his crew was ready for anything. Take us alongside that Devourer battleship, he ordered his pilot. Colonel Davis, are your Marines ready? Over the ship's intercom came the voice of Colonel Amy Davis. Ready and eager, Captain. My people have been wanting to get up close and personal with these machines. The Defiance moved close to a massive Devourer ship, dodging energy beams and missile fire. When they were only a few hundred meters away, Morrison fired magnetic grappling hooks, technology so old that most aliens had forgotten it existed. The metal cables locked onto the enemy hull and pulled the 2 ships together. Immediately, human Marines began cutting through the Devourer's armor with plasma torches and shaped charges. Inside the Devourer ship, the mechanical defenders were confused. Their programming had no protocols for dealing with enemies who would physically enter their vessels. Energy weapons were designed for space combat, not close quarters fighting in narrow corridors. Amy Davis led the first wave of Marines through the breach in the enemy hull. Her soldiers carried assault rifles that fired metal bullets and grenades filled with chemical explosives. The Devourer defense systems, designed to stop energy weapons, were helpless against old-fashioned projectiles. Move fast and hit hard, Amy shouted to her troops. These machines adapt quickly, but they cannot adapt to what they cannot understand. The Marines spread through the ship like a virus, using tactics learned in urban warfare on Earth. They moved in small groups, each team making independent decisions. Some headed for the engine room. Others went for the command center. A few just planted explosives wherever they could find important-looking equipment. The Devourer hive mind tried to coordinate a response, but human tactics made no sense to a logical computer brain. Why would soldiers split up instead of staying together? Why would they destroy random systems instead of targeting specific objectives? Why would they take unnecessary risks when safer alternatives existed? The answer was simple: because humans did not fight like computers. They fought like predators who had evolved on a dangerous world where survival meant being unpredictable. Meanwhile, in space around them, Lieutenant Ben Clark was leading his fighter squadron in an attack pattern that would have horrified alien tacticians. His 12 fighters were spread across thousands of kilometers, each pilot acting independently. "This is WASP leader to all fighters," Ben radioed. "I am seeing weakness in their left flank. But do not coordinate your attacks. Hit them however you want, whenever you want. Keep them guessing." Pilot Sarah White dove her fighter straight down, through a formation of enemy ships, firing her machine guns at anything that looked important. Behind her, Pilot Mike Adams came from a completely different angle, launching missiles at targets she had missed. The Devourers tried to predict the human attacks, but there was no pattern to predict. Every pilot had different training, different instincts, different ideas about how to fight. The mechanical minds that could counter the most sophisticated alien strategies were helpless against human creativity. On the Independence, Admiral Hayes received reports from across the battle zone. Her unconventional tactics were succeeding beyond her wildest hopes. "Admiral," reported Commander Rick Stone, "the enemy fleet is showing signs of confusion. Their formations are breaking down." Hayes nodded. "They are trying to adapt 50 different fighting styles at once. Their hive mind cannot process that much chaos." She opened a channel to all human ships. "All captains, this is Hayes. The enemy is weakening. Press your attacks. Trust your instincts. Make them fear the chaos. We bring." Captain Rachel Green, commanding the destroyer Vengeance, had already lost half her crew to enemy fire. Her ship was barely holding together, but she was not finished fighting. "All remaining weapons, target that command ship," she ordered. Ramming speed. Her crew stared at her in shock. "Captain, that is suicide." "Maybe," Rachel replied. "But it will also take out their fleet commander. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game." The Vengeance accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship, firing every weapon it had. The enemy tried to destroy the human destroyer, but Rachel's ship was moving too fast and too erratically for accurate targeting. At the last moment, she fired her escape pods to save her crew, then rammed the Vengeance directly into the command ship's bridge. The explosion was visible from across the star system. The loss of their command vessel sent shockwaves through the Devourer fleet. For creatures that depended on perfect coordination, the sudden disruption of their command structure was catastrophic. Admiral Kekstar watched the battle from his flagship, hardly believing what he was seeing. The humans had been fighting for 3 hours and had destroyed more enemy ships than the combined alien fleets had managed in 3 years. How are they doing this? He asked Lisa Park, who was serving as his liaison with the human forces. "They fight like humans," she replied simply. "Every decision is individual. Every attack is unique. The Devourers can adapt to patterns, but they cannot adapt to chaos." Kekstar studied his tactical display. The elegant formations of Devourer ships were crumbling as human attacks struck from unexpected directions. Ships that had seemed invincible were exploding under the assault of primitive weapons and unpredictable tactics. "Your people do not fight," he said slowly. "They brawl, like animals," Lisa smiled. "Exactly. And sometimes, Admiral, being an animal is exactly what you need to survive." Back on the Defiance, Colonel Davis and her Marines had fought their way to the Devourer ship's main computer core. The mechanical defenders had been overwhelmed by tactics they could not understand or counter. "Plant the charges," Amy ordered, her demolitions expert. "Let's see how well they adapt to having their brains blown out." The explosives detonated throughout the enemy ship, destroying systems that had never been designed to survive physical attack. The massive Devourer battleship shuddered and began to break apart. As Amy and her surviving Marines evacuated back to their own ship, she could see other human vessels across the battle zone doing impossible things. ships ramming enemy vessels, fighters attacking in swarms with no coordination, boarding parties fighting hand-to-hand with mechanical soldiers. It was chaos. It was madness. It was completely against every rule of civilized warfare. And it was working. The Devourer fleet, which had never known defeat, was learning what it meant to face an enemy that refused to follow any rules at all. For the first time in their existence, the machines began to understand something they had never experienced before: fear. The Battle of Terminus 7 ended not with a grand explosion or dramatic final duel, but with something no one had ever seen before: the Devourer fleet in full retreat. Admiral Susan Hayes stood on the bridge of the Independence, watching the tactical display in amazement. Red dots representing enemy ships were fleeing toward the edge of the system at maximum speed. After 4 hours of chaotic human warfare, the mechanical minds that had conquered half the galaxy had decided that discretion was the better part of valor. "All ships, cease fire," she ordered. "Let them run. We have made our point." Around her, the surviving human fleet regrouped. Of the 50 ships that had entered battle, 37 were still operational. Many were badly damaged, held together by emergency repairs and the stubborn refusal of their crews to give up. But they were alive, and they were victorious. Captain Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the radio from the Defiance. His ship looked like it had been through a meat grinder, but it was still flying. "Admiral, this is Morrison. Boarding mission successful. We have captured 3 intact Devourer ships, and enough of their technology to keep our scientists busy for years." "Well done, Captain," Hayes replied. "Colonel Davis and our Marines?" "Tired, battered, and asking when we can do it again," Jake said with a laugh. "Turns out these machines do not like it when you shoot them with bullets and blow them up with old-fashioned explosives." Across the battlefield, other human ships reported similar results. Lieutenant Ben Clark's fighter squadron had lost only 2 pilots while destroying dozens of enemy craft. The surviving pilots were already comparing stories and arguing about who had gotten the most kills. But it was not just the human victory that shocked the galaxy. It was how they had achieved it. Admiral Kekstar arrived aboard the Independence an hour after the battle ended. The tall, 4-armed alien moved slowly through the human ship, staring at everything he saw. The corridors were cramped and functional, nothing like the elegant passages of alien vessels. The crew members he passed were dirty, tired, and grinning, like wolves. "Admiral Hayes," he said when he reached the bridge, "I must apologize for doubting your people. What you accomplished today, ... it should have been impossible." Susan turned to face him. Her uniform was torn, and she had a bandage on her forehead from when an enemy hit had thrown her against a bulkhead. But her eyes were bright with victory. "It was only impossible if you think like a machine, Admiral," she said. "The Devourers are incredibly advanced, but they have one fatal weakness. They assume everyone else thinks like they do." Kekstar studied the tactical recordings of the battle. "Your ships had no formation, no coordination. Half the time, it looked like you were fighting each other as much as the enemy. That was the point," Susan explained. "Look at every previous battle with the Devourers. The alien fleets moved in perfect formations, used coordinated tactics, followed logical strategies. Beautiful to watch, but also predictable. The Devourers could analyze the patterns and develop countermeasures." She pointed to the display showing human ship movements. "We did not give them patterns to analyze. Every captain made independent decisions. Every pilot fought their own way. Every Marine squad used different tactics. The Devourers' greatest strength, their ability to adapt, became useless because there was nothing consistent to adapt to." "Commander." Lisa Park joined them on the bridge, her face glowing with pride. "Admiral Kekstar, I want you to meet someone. This is Captain Sarah Bell, our tactical analyst. She figured out why the Devourers were so successful against alien fleets. Sarah was a young woman with short blonde hair and intelligent eyes. She had spent the entire battle analyzing enemy responses and coordinating information between human ships. The problem was not that alien technology was insufficient, Sarah explained. The problem was that alien thinking had evolved beyond warfare. Your species have spent millions of years developing logic, efficiency, and perfect coordination. You fight like artists, creating beautiful tactical displays. Admiral Kekstar's 4 eyes fixed on her. And humans? Humans never stopped being predators, Sarah said simply. We fight ugly. We fight dirty. We do whatever it takes to win. The Devourers expected to face advanced civilizations that fought with honor and logic. Instead, they got pack hunters who had no rules except survival. Over the next few days, as reports of the human victory spread across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. Species that had been preparing for surrender began planning counterattacks. Worlds that had accepted defeat started building new fleets. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss this unprecedented development. For the first time in 3 years, there was hope in their voices. Admiral Kekstar addressed the assembly. The humans have achieved what we thought impossible. They have defeated the Devourers not through superior technology, but through superior tactics. Tactics? Scoffed General Scarclaw of the Sorcs. They fought like barbarians. No coordination, no elegance, no honor. No, said Bright Star of Morning, her light pulsing thoughtfully. They fought like survivors. Perhaps we have become too civilized for our own good. Queen Hive Song of the Chitauri buzzed in agreement. My analysis of the battle recordings shows something remarkable. The humans did not try to outthink the Devourers. They simply refused to think like them at all. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Galactic Defense Coalition formally requested that humanity assume military leadership of all allied forces. The species that had once dismissed humans as primitive now begged them to lead the war effort. Admiral Hayes accepted the position with characteristic directness. We will lead, but we do it our way. No more perfect formations. No more elegant tactics. From now on, we fight to win. The transformation of galactic warfare began immediately. Alien officers were assigned to human ships to learn chaos tactics. Scientists began studying human psychology to understand how individualistic thinking could be applied to military strategy. Engineers started developing weapons that emphasized kinetic impact over energy efficiency. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. For millions of years, the advanced species of the galaxy had believed that civilization meant moving beyond violence and chaos toward logic and order. The humans had proven that sometimes survival required embracing the chaos rather than conquering. It's 6 months later, Admiral Hayes stood before the Galactic Council to deliver her final report on the war. The Devourers had been pushed back to the edge of the galaxy, their fleets shattered by human-led forces that fought with controlled chaos rather than logical precision. The war is not over, she told the assembled representatives. But the Devourers have learned something they never expected to learn, that chaos is not the opposite of intelligence. Sometimes it is intelligence in its purest form. Admiral Kekstar, who had become one of humanity's strongest supporters, asked the question everyone was thinking. What made humans different? What allowed you to succeed where we failed? Susan Hayes smiled. You evolved beyond warfare, Admiral. You became too civilized to fight effectively. But humans ... We never forgot that sometimes the difference between life and death is the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. She paused, looking out at the representatives of 100 worlds. The moment we entered that battle, We did not bring better weapons or superior technology. We brought something far more dangerous, the refusal to accept defeat. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The most primitive species in the galaxy had saved them all, not by becoming more advanced, but by remaining true to their chaotic, unpredictable, gloriously human nature. Later, as the representatives filed out to begin implementing the new military doctrines, Admiral Kekstar sent a message to every corner of the galaxy. Let it be recorded that the moment humans entered battle, doubt was vanished across the stars. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they brought with them something we had forgotten, the beautiful, terrible chaos of creatures who refuse to surrender, refuse to quit, and refuse to accept that any enemy is unbeatable. The age of human warfare had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.